before everything else, I'd like to say, maligayang pagdating sa Pilipinas.
I want to see it for myself because I've always heard these stories about people telling me how it's like.
I'm going on this trip because I feel I'll be able to see the Philippines in a new perspective.
I really want to be familiar with my culture and be proud of who I am.
I'm just very open to whatever is to come out of this trip.
12 years ago I came on this trip. It changed me forever. These are my people, and this is why I'm here.
Welcome back home.
Every single Filipino movie I've seen, it's like coming to life as I look around.
It's cool because we're getting to know more about our history.
Normally this is the kind of stuff that you just like hear in like stories.
Heritage, Filipino product.
This is not an opportunity you just take for granted.
We're like brothers and sisters. We're all family.
Honestly, it's such a humbling experience because you do see that they don't have a lot, but they still are happy, they still have fun.
And it makes me realize that we are privileged. What if I lived here? What if I was born here?
Like, this feels like I'm supposed to be here.
It was a beautiful exchange of cultures in my opinion.
It was pretty cool to see how they live their lives.
Other islands, they don't have what the Philippines have.
This place is something straight out of a postcard.
Welcome to the Philippines.
We're helping communities of people who are less fortunate.
Well, that's what Bainyohan is. They're like there for each other. That's like the community aspect of it.
After this trip, like, it just made me consider like a bigger plan about what I want to do when I come back.
We went and we did something that emotionally changed all of our lives together.
This trip was definitely one I'll never forget.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening to all of our friends in Gawad Kalinga, USA, and good morning to everyone who are watching in the Philippines and hopefully even other parts of the world, right? Sobrang ambitious tayo dito sa ating Kwentong GK. Welcome to another episode of Kwentong GK. Tonight is actually our 8th episode. I cannot believe that we've been going on for 2 months already for something that originally our executive director, Maricel Villanueva, thought of just sort of a platform or a tool for us for our area directors to update each other about what's going on in their specific or respective areas. It has actually grown into a more, I guess, more inclusive in terms of, people who are coming on, sharing their experiences on how they have encountered GK, their own GK stories. And this evening, we are lucky, very lucky to have 2 young Phil-Ams who have actually encountered GK, have known about Gawad Kalinga through a project called Filgrimage, right? So before I introduce my very special guests, or our very special guests, because it's not just my show, right? It's not just my webisode or whatever it's called, right? Webisode, whatever you young folks now call these online thing nowadays, right? But it's actually everyone. It's everyone who's involved in Gawad Kalinga. This is our own sort of, show or platform to exchange stories and have, conversations. But before I introduce our very special guests this evening, I wanted to just share with you a little bit of information about what Filgrimage, what Filgrimage is really all about, okay? It's not a speech de pek, okay? Pilgrimage siya talaga. It's not pilgrimage, right? It's Filgrimage, and maybe our guests for this evening can, shed some light as to why it's called that. But I think when we describe to you what it is about, you will understand why we call it such, right? But it is basically a project of the Filipino school, which, you may or may not know. For some of you who have been involved in the Gawad Kalinga work, you probably all know Tony Olaes, right? A very good friend of mine, and also is a philanthropist and, an entrepreneur, very prominent entrepreneur, especially in the San Diego area. He is actually the founder of Filipino School and also the very first, I guess, Filgrim, right? I guess. Well, I don't know what you call yourselves, right? But okay, so please help me welcome this evening Tyler Jacobs and Gabby Almazar. Thank you for joining me.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you guys doing this evening? What time is it there? Are you both in San Diego?
Yeah. Yes. It's a 5 o'clock.
All right, cool. So did you just get out of school? What's going on?
Yeah. So I mean, Gabby and I are both in college, so we've been doing our schoolwork online. So it's throughout the day. But yeah,
Okay.
for now, it's all done.
So now you just basically hop from one Zoom call to another?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, that's how it is.
All right. Well, the important thing is that you both are safe and healthy, hopefully, and so are your families. All right. Well, who wants to share with us what Filgrimage is all about, other than what I already, said a little bit?
Yeah, you want to take over?
Don't be shy. This is just, super casual conversation. Like you're with, with family right here, even though I don't know how many people are watching us right now, but maybe our family. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to share with us what you know about Filgrimage and why you think that will be really an appropriate, term to coin this project or movement.
Well, how I see Filgrimage, it's a transformative trip back to the motherland. A lot of us didn't really experience the Philippines before. Me personally, though, I've been to the Philippines many times. I just had never experienced what we experienced when we went to the Philippines back in July 2019. And I also just recently learned this. In our logo, in the Filgrimage logo, the F is flipped. And what that's supposed to represent is when you go on this pilgrimage, on this trip, it like your mind kind of just flips. Your perspective changes.
You mean the logo for Filgrimage? The F is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
the F is backwards.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never noticed that either. All right. Because, sorry, I interrupted you. Because why is that, you think, that...
when you go back to the Philippines and experience this trip, it changes your whole perspective on, like, how you first saw the Philippines and, like, because how Kuya Tony would describe it, when he first went to the Philippines, he only heard bad stuff about the Philippines and never really saw it in, like, a good light. He didn't think about, like, or he never really experienced the people of the Philippines and, like, the kindness of the people there in the Philippines. And after he went to the Philippines and kind of immersed himself in the culture and the people, it changed his whole perspective on, like, how he sees his own culture, and I guess wants to be involved in his whole culture too.
Right. And that's exactly, I think, what, from what I've read about Filgrimage and heard about it from Tony and other people who have been involved in it also, is that it is really intended to be a transformational experience that would connect the next generation of Phil-Ams, which, all right, to your rich heritage and culture. So Tyler, tell us, is that something that happened to you? Did you see that transformation that was
Oh yeah,
for when you went over there? How was that?
of course. I mean, for me personally, because I'm not full Filipino, so I never really got immersed in the culture, living here. I mean, I was born in America. My mom was also born in America, so I was like I was like super distant to begin with. So I really had this kind of struggle beforehand on the trip, just or beforehand going to the trip. I didn't really know who I was in terms of being Filipino, and I know that even in high school I joined organizations, trying to find myself, but nothing can compare to what it was like on the trip. I mean, actually stepping on foot in the Philippines, I've never been before. So actually saying that I've done that, just, in itself, it makes me feel like I'm more Filipino than I was, a year ago or 2 years ago. But yeah, I mean, after the trip and going through, everything that we've seen, we've learned about, it was transformative. And the fact that I kind of really understand what it means to be Filipino. And I can proudly say that, and with the definition in my head behind it, and telling my friends and all that kind of stuff, and I can relate to them. My Filipino friends who've been to the Philippines also, we can talk about it, and it makes me feel it had me find my own kind of my identity better going on this trip. So I think in that sense, it was very, very transformative for me. I mean, it changed my whole perspective coming out of it, and yeah, so that's where I am right now. So
Yeah, those are, I heard a couple of interesting things about what you shared, right? You said that
Mhm,
you've been, distant to your Filipino culture.
mhm.
There, before you went to the Philippines, did you ever feel that there was something missing? I mean, unlike Gabby, she's made a few trips to the Philippines prior to this one, right? But you've never been to the Philippines prior to this trip, is that right? Okay.
I've never.
Before you traveled over there and saw everything that you saw, did you ever feel that there was something missing in your sort of identity or, of who you are as a person?
Mhm.
Was it just something that you never really thought there was something missing, but when you went there, it just kind of completed everything that you never even thought that was missing? I don't know if that's a little bit too out of this world, but, but
No,
did you
no,
know
most
that was
definitely.
missing
There
before?
was, I think there was it was like a mixture of both because I know that when I was growing up, a little kid, I just knew that Filipino, that was Filipino, just the name. And but as I got older, I started to ask myself like, what does that really mean? Because all I grew up with was just going to the Filipino parties, eating Filipino food, and that's basically it. I mean, I knew that the language exists in Tagalog, but I never picked it up. So I just felt so disconnected, and talking to my friends who were full Filipino who actually immigrated from the Philippines to America, and they would have conversations with other Filipinos, and I had no idea what they were talking about. I mean, even if it wasn't English, I mean, they were talking about something Filipino, something traditionally Filipino that I have no idea what it was. So I couldn't really relate to them. I think I felt like an outcast amongst like my own people here in America, and I just kind of wanted to get that back, or trying to feel included, and trying to understand where they're coming from. So I mean, that's why I think that's what I got out of this trip was having that kind of what I wanted to get out of this trip, for sure. It's just finding myself.
Wow, like feeling like you feel like you should know what they're talking about, but you don't.
Yeah,
Kind
yeah.
of
I kind of felt guilty in that sense.
right, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how about you, Gabby? You said you've been to the Philippines a few times. Was that with your family, or was it like what was that trip? What were those trips like compared to this trip that you made with Filgrimage?
Well, when I would go to the Philippines prior to the 2019 trip, I would always just go to visit family. I never really went to other parts of the Philippines. And like growing up, I always thought I was so like Filipino because like my mom is a Filipino teacher here in San Diego, so she would always teach me the culture. But like it wasn't until high school that I realized that there was something missing. Like I can understand Filipino, but I can't speak it. So like whenever I would go to the Philippines to like be with family, there would be like a language barrier between me and my like family and cousins and all that. So that like there was like a disconnect when I would be back in the Philippines, and it wasn't until this trip that I really realized like everything else that's part of the Filipino culture that I never really experienced, and like getting to see it for the first time and getting to experience it, it kind of like I guess you could say helped complete what was missing. Um, so yeah, that I really enjoyed this trip.
Did
Yeah.
it maybe help you understand where the disconnect was coming from?
Yeah, because going back to the Philippines, I never really interacted with the people, like especially like just the people that live around like my family in the Philippines. I never really interacted with them. My cousins would interact with them, but since I couldn't really speak to them, like I was too shy to talk to them or like play with them or anything. But with this trip, we were more encouraged to try to interact and speak with the people there, even though like we knew it was hard for us to interact and like speak with them. But yeah, just getting to talk to the people there, it really helped with that disconnect.
Right. Well, I ask if the Pilgrimage trip helped with a disconnect, because as I understand, and I've watched, some of the episodes already. I saw that you guys had the experience of seeing like the more lavish, more I guess extravagant parts of the country, right, or of the culture, where you'd gone to this nice hotel, right? At this nice hotel, right? And then you also went to, to the areas, like the depressed areas, or people who are, a little bit more disadvantaged, right? And so, so how did that affect you, seeing the disparity between those two sort of, worlds, but really is only within one country, and it's probably just, you just a jeepney drive away or something like that. How is that? What was your reaction to seeing that?
I mean, I think it was very apparent. I mean, the first couple of days that I was there personally, in my personal experience, I kind of just noticed how divided in terms of like financially the state of the Philippines was. I mean, Manila is like the most dense popular city in the Philippines, and just seeing how there's not really a middle ground between the rich and the poor. I mean, we were fortunate enough to stay in these hotels, but I mean, when we would go out and explore the country, or the nearby areas, even the bus ride, looking out in the surrounding areas, it just kind of blew me away. I mean, I remember the first couple of days I took the time to just stare, like just to look out the window and just observe everything and take everything in. For me, it was very, I was just blown away about how just different. There was no, it was like a hard line between the two. And I mean, it was very different from here. I mean, here it kind of just all blends together, and you can't really, there's no like definitive point in which someone is poor or rich, or
Right.
but there you can see it. It's very visual, and I mean, for me it was heartbreaking just to see that.
How about you, Gabby? How did you feel about that?
Well, like I said, I've been to the Philippines many times. And where my family is from, they're not necessarily from the super nice areas, and they're not from the super poor areas. So getting to see the nice areas, it was definitely a change of scenery, just because I had never experienced that kind of environment or like setting before. So going to the poorer areas, I didn't think that like it would be too much of a difference from what I would usually see when I go to visit family. And it wasn't until we actually got to go inside one of the houses, like in the area that we visited, where it really hit, because the house was only about 10 by 10. So like we have a bathroom in my house bigger than that. So it was just very humbling and eye-opening to witness and see, because the people that lived in the house, they weren't complaining to us about their lifestyle. They were saying that they were happy and making do with what they had, and like and doing stuff on my own. It was just crazy to think, because like here in America, like it'd be so hard to live like that, and like a lot of people here would probably be complaining about like that kind of lifestyle. So it was just really nice and humbling to see that they were happy with what they had.
I mean, if I may share my own experience, I was born and raised in the Philippines, right? But my first encounter of poverty was, my family was not wealthy or anything like that, but we were comfortable. And so, the moment we lived I guess, safe subdivision, right? It was comfortable. We had a comfortable life. But the moment you get out of the subdivision, you see all these shanties. But like you, Gabby, and I can totally relate to that. It was just all part of the landscape. It was part of it. You see it every day. Every day, I would walk to school. I went to Miriam College for some of our, of our viewers or people who are watching this, they probably know where that is. I would walk from my house and just cross the street, and that's where my school was, right? And, and the shanties were just part of the landscape until, like you said, Gabby, right? I went to this really poor community up in Tanay Rizal. And, and when you go to their house and, talk to them, right? You actually hear their stories from them and not just something that you read on the papers or watch over, on the news or whatever, right? And, and you listen to them, tell their own stories, and it would just break your heart. And when I came back, I was just filled with guilt, right? Because I felt like, well, I lived a comfortable life, and it has nothing to do with whatever I did. It was something that my parents provided to me, right? And then even them, they also come from, from okay family, not poor, but not very wealthy or whatever. But what about these poor people? A lot of them are just born poor, and it was just something that was passed on from generation to generation, right? And that's why I'm so happy that I've been involved with Gawad Kalinga in whatever. I really try to be involved in whatever little way I can. There's so much work to do, and really get this opportunity to talk to people like you who took the initiative to go to the Philippines, signed up for a Filgrimage, maybe in the beginning to initially to connect to your heritage and culture, but you really went beyond just connecting to your to who you are as as a Filipino Americans, right? But okay, so tell us, how did you even become a part of Filgrimage? Were you recruited? Did Tony knock on your door and be like, you want a ticket to the Philippines? I don't know, tell us.
For me, I was very involved with, like I said, because I mentioned earlier how in my self-discovery throughout high school, I wanted to learn more about our culture. So I went ahead and took part of, we actually were fortunate enough to have a Filipino language class at school. And with that came a Filipino American club. So I went ahead and joined that, and starting to work with them and trying to organize events and stuff like that. One of these events actually I was hosting, and Kuya Tony was actually invited, as one of our special guests, to talk. And then at that point, he talked to me, and he talked to my teacher about this whole idea of bringing some high school students, at the time I was in high school, back to the Philippines, and for the first time for some of us, and just to experience this all. And so I think from that point on, it kind of just I was fortunate enough to go on this trip and learn everything about the Philippines that I wanted to. So.
And you, Gabby, same story, or how did Tony find you?
So like I said before, it wasn't until high school that I realized there was that disconnect. And I was talking to my mom about it. And since she is one of the Filipino language teachers here in San Diego, has connections with the Filipino school. So she knew Kuya Tony. And she was the one that told me about the trip and asking if I'd be interested in going on this trip, because she knew what the trip was all about. So I said yes, and that was actually in 2018. So 2019 was actually my second time on the trip, just because I enjoyed the 2018 trip so much that I wanted to go back.
Well, so then for people who may not know Kuya Tony, hi Tony, he's probably watching this. So I'm pretty sure he's going to at least watch, it's uploaded on Facebook. Mm-hmm. They don't know Kuya Tony. How can they sign up for this? Is there a website that they can check out and sign up for it? Or what are there qualifications that, that the Filipino school is looking for?
No, not at all. Anyone could go on the trip. You see glimpses in the series. You see people. You see this 2-year-old was one of our closest friends on the trip.
What's her name?
There's a 2-year-old named Mikey who's on the trip.
Okay.
Yeah, and so anyone can go. Honestly, it's whatever age you whoever you are, just go and you can learn about the trip, or just learn about being Filipino, basically.
I also believe that on the FilipinoSchool.com, There's a like interest form that you can fill out if you are interested in going on the trip. They can send you more information about when the next trip would be.
Okay, and we'll try to remember to put that in the description of this episode when we put it up on I mean, it's going live on Facebook, but we can put out all that information. It's Filipinoschool.org. Is that
the Filipinoschoool.com. And it's the same website where you can find also the 14 episodes to the series. So
all right. And then all they need to do is just to create an account, right? Log in and they can watch.
Completely free too. Yeah. You can watch it.
Awesome. Okay. So now I know the trip was last year. When was it? Was it July last year? July last year. Okay. So it's been a little over a year. And so what's next? What, as soon as you came back, were there any projects that you did, or, what did you all get together, or, what did you guys end up doing when you came back from the trip?
Well, it took a couple of weeks just to like kind of settle down and kind of like understand what exactly what happened. And it was. And then all of a sudden we're sent back home to somewhere to like our normal lives basically. So I mean we also talked and we all talk and stuff like that. But I think the mantra of what we kept on talking about was that we kind of want to go back and keep on helping. Because I know in the later episodes, we actually get involved with the GK Village too, and also volunteer some more time to help build. So we enjoyed that experience. We always talked about how fun that was. I mean, it was fun just working with our friends and stuff like that. But it's also it feels good knowing that we're actually doing something. And so a lot of us, we kind of had this thing about going back and just doing that again. But we figured that there's so much. I mean, there had to be some other way to. Just building houses and going and volunteering your own time is one thing. But how about like inspiring like a bunch of other people to do the same? So I think that's also again where the series also comes from, to inspire those who want to make a change in the Philippines and help them out basically. So we were all kind of. I kind of had that idea and try to push for it even now.
Right. Well, at the very least, I mean, it's inevitable now that you're ambassador and ambassadress of, for people in the Philippines, right? To entice people to come and visit, and then maybe in the process, people will come up with sort of different ways to reach out and help out, right? You guys are obviously still in school. Not that you can't do anything. We all are empowered to do whatever is within our resources to give back, and and even just sharing your stories is quite powerful, right? And and that people know about the experience, and even and encourage them for them too to experience what you guys have experienced. Yes, Gabby. How about you?
So for me personally, the trip kind of changed my perspective on what I want to do moving forward. And that is like, since I'm an engineering student, it kind of influenced me to kind of go into a field of work that does something like what GK does, build houses for those underserved communities and just help and give back to those people.
And Tyler, are you still in high school or are you in college already?
No, actually, 2020 I graduated, so earlier this year I did. But yeah, I go to SDSU as an engineering student as well.
Engineering student also. Oh my goodness. Wow. I'm blown away. All right. Well, we have about 5 more minutes left, but this will be our last episode for October. And, some people may or may not know that October is actually declared by the U.S. Congress and U.S. Senate as Filipino American History Month, right? Not to confuse it with Heritage Month, because some people call it Filipino American Heritage Month. It really is not. It's Filipino American History Month. And basically what it is we celebrate or we recognize the contribution of Filipinos in the history of the US or of America, right? But I think it's also important for us to understand, first of all, what does it mean to be Filipino American, right? And I shared this story with Lauren, right? I'm just gonna, I'm gonna share this anecdote, which is I thought was kind of funny, but not that funny. It's interesting, maybe, right? Is okay? So when this was maybe 2012, so several years ago, I was working for a TV network in the Philippines, and and I brought a reporter with me to welcome a group of Philams from California to visit the Gawad Kalinga Enchanted Farm, and so they're a mix of of people from California, and some are full-blooded Filipino, right, and some are half Filipino, half Caucasian, like Tyler and everything. And so we were waiting with a reporter, and then so the group came, and the reporter was like, "So who among them are Filipino Americans?" And I was just like confused with the question because all of them are Filipino Americans, right? So later on, I would realize that I think a lot of people in the Philippines think that when we say Filipino American, that you have to be half Filipino and half something else, or half Filipino, half Caucasian. So you have to look mestizo, right? Like, right, like Tyler, American, right? So I had to explain to her, and this is me, and maybe, those folks out there watching this have a different description or meaning for being Filipino American. For me, and I was born and raised in the Philippines. I came here at 26. I'm already 48. So I've been here more than half of my life, right? Right. So I'm like counting in my head. But I think what Filipino American means is that if you had spent a significant amount of time in the US or, being exposed to the American culture, you inevitably adapt to the culture. And so you transform. Again, inevitably, it's not something that you do consciously and decide, okay, from now on, I'm going to be Filipino American. It's just kind of funny, right? But, because you adapt to the culture, then you become Filipino American. That's just for me, right? But, maybe I'm also a byproduct of my own personal experiences, which may not be exact same experiences as you guys have. So tell me, what does it mean for you to be Filipino American? And any one of you can start while I drink water and listen.
Obviously, I am Filipino American. By definition, I was born like that. So, yeah, for literally. In terms of just the context of the actual real definition of being Filipino American, I just say it's just being Filipino who lives in America. It's just being Americanized or just living in America. This is being Filipino and happen to be Filipino. That probably just also defines you as Filipino American.
And Gabby?
To me, I guess similar to what you said, like.
Were you born in San Diego, or did you grow up in San Diego, or born in the Philippines?
I was born and raised in San Diego.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
To me, I guess like it's similar to what you said. Being like just kind of when you're adapted to the culture and like you kind of. Well, for you moved here to America and like you kind of assimilated to the culture, and you said you consider yourself now Filipino American?
I guess I am, because I'm both kind of exposed to the same culture.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but it's kind of just, it is being exposed to both cultures, and like, there's people like Tyler that are both half Filipino, half American, but they're not even exposed to their Filipino side. Mm-hmm. And But for me personally, I would consider them Filipino Americans just because um they do come from that culture, even though they may not know it, like know that culture very well. I personally would still consider them Filipino American just because they do come from that culture, and it's a culture that they shouldn't like try to they shouldn't forget and just kind of
Or silent, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked that question. So you see, like, there's only three of us here, and we're coming from different perspectives too, right? And and even that struggle to even, it. First of all, it's not fair that I asked that question and just threw it out there. I've been thinking about this for like many years since that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely have, an advantage over you guys because it's something that I did come up with like overnight or whatever, because I was actually confused with the experience. Before that, because I moved here in 1998 to 2011, so I had lived here 13 years prior to moving back to the Philippines. I never really thought of myself of being anything else but Filipino. Does that make sense? But when I moved to the Philippines, lived there for 2.5 years, and then all of a sudden, going through some culture shock, which is a shock in itself for me. I'm like, why would I experience any culture shock? I'm Filipino, I was born and raised here, but I did, right? Because I did not realize just how much of the American culture has already rubbed off on me, right? So when I went to the Philippines, like, I'm not the Filipino that I used to be. Does that make sense? But I'm still Filipino. I still love my country. I still love my people. I still love my culture and everything. And it doesn't mean that you've expanded, you're who you are as a person. It doesn't mean that you're losing any of it. Does that make sense? And again, it's something that, I have just been thinking about for many years now since that experience and encounter with that, reporter who asked me, right? So I think it's really important for us to think about those things, right? Well, we are celebrating again, this October is our contribution as a people to this country, right? And to the history of this country. But our challenge is that because as Filipinos, like you said, Gabby, it's so easy for us to assimilate, right? We can easily adapt to the culture, whatever is thrown at us, right? We adapt. And we're so good at it that in the process, we kind of blur the lines of who we are. And some of us really lose our identity, as people. Does that make sense? And so I think it's important to think about these things and to talk about it. And then, because by knowing who we are as a people, which is obviously, what you have gone through with Filgrimage, obviously it's going to be, it's not a one trip, one shot kind of deal. It's something that it's a journey that you probably started at Filgrimage, and maybe for some of you started a long time ago, just trying to understand who you are as a person, your makeup and all of that, your culture and all of that. And then obviously Filgrimage helped a lot in shaping that, or at least raising some questions and ideas and all of that, right? But this is really just a part of your journey. We all journey together as one people. And so, our hope, and hey, Tony, my friend, I salute you for starting this. And I really wish that this is going to go on for many, many years, right? And for more young Phil-Ams like you, Gabby and Tyler, to be a part of it, because I think it's really important to know who we are, and hopefully we will no longer be called the silent Asians. I don't know that, right? They call Filipinos as silent Asians because we're not as, I guess, as as prominent, or we don't really go out on the, we don't really. You don't see a lot of us in the media, right? We're not well represented, all of that, right? But that could change if we begin to tell our own stories, which is exactly what you guys are doing, what we are trying to do here as well with Quantum Chique. All right, so at this point, I'd like to encourage you to invite everyone to, watch Filgrimage, some information about where to catch the episodes. Gabby, Tyler, whoever wants to
Yeah, of course. So all 14 episodes, or all episodes right now, are going to be, available to watch Like I said earlier, you can find it on thefilippinoschool.com. You can sign up for free, and you will watch all 14 episodes right there. You can also find it on I Want TFC. You don't need to actually pay for it. It's all free, like I said earlier. But also, it's also showing on cable. So if you have TFC at home, every Saturday throughout from now until till the middle of November, they'll be showing the Filgrimage. So make sure to catch it on there. And there's also Mixed TV as well. And also, you can also find more information and more updates about Filgrimage on our Instagram at Filgrimage Series, as well as our Facebook page, I believe, under the same handle. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. Anything to add, Gabby?
Tyler said it all.
You can say one shot.
All right. Well, any final message, any final thoughts, any imparting words of wisdom? It's okay.
Watch Filgrimage.
What was that? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Watch Filgrimage.
Definitely.
All right.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me this evening. It has been a pleasure. I always get excited when I talk to, people your age. Oh my gosh, I feel so old already. And I get excited because, it gives me so much hope, for the country, for our motherland, like for the Philippines and for our people, when we see younger people care about our culture, about promoting our culture, about advocating for the rights and the plights of people who are in need in our country, right? And it gives me so much hope because I know that it will not stop in my and Tony's generation. That will continue on, right? So I encourage you, Tyler and Gabby, to continue to tell your stories, right? And to reach out to as many people as possible. And for those of you who are watching this and are interested to be part of Filgrimage, please check out Filipino School or thefilippinoschool.com.
The Filipino School.
Yes.
Filippinoschool.com. And again, we will put that in the description to this video, to this episode. Please check it out and reach out and find out more about your culture and your heritage. And you might have just as rich of an experience as Tyler and Gabby here. With that said, have a good night, everyone. This has been Donna Reyes for Kwentong GK.